Welcome back. This time we're talking about Ghostbusters 2. Earlier this week I reviewed Ghostbusters, and now we're moving on to the sequel, all in preparation for the new reboot that comes out at the end of this week. Ghostbusters 2 arrived in 1989, 5 years after the original, and it brought back pretty much everyone from the first one. Director Ivan Reitman, Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, Harold Ramis, Ernie Hudson, Sigourney Weaver, Rick Moranis, and even Slimer. Once again, Dan Aykroyd and Harold Ramis penned the script, so really this film had everything going for it. Now, it's been quite a few years since I've seen Ghostbusters from start to finish, even longer than the original Ghostbusters. And like I said in my review for that film, there are those films that you can sort of idolize. Either they're from your childhood or they're the movies that you just haven't seen in a while, and then when you watch them again, they just don't quite live up to what you remembered. And while Ghostbusters was definitely not one of these movies, Ghostbusters 2 sadly kind of is. It's not a bad movie, but it's not quite as good, or nearly as good, as I remembered it. And a lot of that sadly has to do with the script. Now the story, as the movie opens, you very emphatically tells us it's been 5 years, just like it had been 5 years since the original movie came out. And we're slowly reintroduced to our characters. And for the most part, the last 5 years have been pretty bad. We quickly find out that the Ghostbusters are no longer in business. In the aftermath of the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man attack, they were sued or fined by pretty much every city and state agency out there and pretty much had to shut down. Egon's probably the best off. He's back working at some university. Ray has an occult shop. It's never really said what Winston's up to, but we do get to see him and Ray putting on the costume for a children's birthday party, so you can tell they're not in a very good place. Peter now has a cable access show about the supernatural. We find out that he did date Dana for a while, Sigourney Weaver's character, but apparently they broke up. She later got married, ended up having a baby, and is now divorced. And she's actually the first character we see in the movie. She's heading home with her son Oscar, and we get the first hints of this new supernatural threat when we see this a little bit of red goo, red slime, and it latches on to the baby's baby carriage, and it goes on to a wild ride, and that's what sort of kind of gets the plot rolling in this movie. And there's really kind of two threats. We have this red slime that they discover underneath. There's this whole river of slime, and on a kind of a parallel track, we don't know at first that they're actually related, is that Dana is now working for this museum. She's working to restore old paintings, and her boss, Janosch, played by Peter MacNicol, brings out this giant painting of this medieval figure named Vigo. He's sort of like the Vlad the Impaler type character, where he did a lot of horrible things. And there's this giant painting, and there's something supernatural going on with it. And that's pretty much the setup for the movie, where ultimately the Ghostbusters are going to get back into the game, go back busting ghosts, and then ultimately have to face this ultimate evil. And like the movie, we'll have this big showdown with the big baddie. And that's one of the problems I have with this movie, is if you break it down, it's the plot point per plot point, it's almost a carbon copy of the original movie. It starts with them basically out of work, taking a case involving Dana Barrett, then having a successful case, really kind of building off of that, getting a lot of business, having a nice montage of them catching ghosts. Something happens, they get persecuted by the city government, and then of course the city government's got to backtrack on that and allow them to save the day. It's pretty well the same movie again. And honestly, I probably could have gotten over that more so than the other big problem I have with the script. And that's that they never really seem to nail down the basics of this story. We have this red slime that's apparently building up because of all the bad and negative feelings in New York. And then we have this painting of Vigo and his attempt to come back to life and take over the world, and he's using the slime. But they never really kind of tell us, is the slime part of his plan, or was it something that was there and the spirit in the painting came across it? I mean, I know it's Ghostbusters, but I just couldn't get it to make sense for me. Looking at it now, having not seen it for a while, the script is pretty messy, and I hate that, but that's just the case. And because of that, because of some other decisions that they make, the ending is kind of anticlimactic. It's kind of hokey in places. I mean, there's one thing, and I don't want to spoil anything. If you haven't actually seen this movie, I still recommend it. It's not as good nearly as the first one. But there's one moment right near the end that involves a painting and how it might change. And every time I watch the movie now, I know it's coming, and I'm like, oh, that's just the one step too far. We're like, okay, guys, I know it's a comedy, but that just doesn't work for me at all. But there are things I do like about this. The acting is once again good. The actors all come back to play their roles. I like all of their characters. Lewis and Janine, they get a little bit of romance going on. That's fun. I mean, there's a lot of things to like about this movie. It's just there are other things that I don't quite like as much. Peter McNichol as Janosch, I can tell that's definitely a character that you're either going to like his very over-the-top performance or you're not. It doesn't bother me. That's not something that really bothers me at all. And I've read that they might have been trying to kind of kid it down a little bit, because at this point the cartoon was quite popular. It was 3 seasons in, so you can tell that they kind of added some things to make it mesh more with the cartoon timeline. But I honestly don't really see that. I mean, there's not the overtly sexual jokes like the infamous Peter in bed scene from the first movie. You don't have anything like that, but I don't really feel like it's kidded down. And surprisingly, there are actually moments in this movie that I find scarier than in Ghostbusters. And it might just because I've seen it so many times. There's nothing in Ghostbusters that really scares me or I find creepy. You know, in that movie, you had the opening scene in the library, and that was definitely kind of horror-esque. But there was nothing in that movie that was really creepy. There are just, for whatever reason, maybe it was just the age that I saw the movie, there's some scenes that always creep me out. There's a particular scene in a dark room, and they're looking at photographs. That's always the scene that just kind of gives me the chills. And then there's also a scene when they're down in the subway car, and there's actually some kind of grotesque imagery as some evil force is trying to scare them, that I just find a lot creepier than pretty much anything that's in the original. And I do have to say, while I don't like this movie as much as the original, like that movie, it does hold up quite well. This came out in 1989, so we're looking at 27 years since this came out. As with the first one, the special effects are obviously dated, but they're not terrible. There are a few cases, like there's the 2 ghosts that we see in the courthouse that are a bit cartoonish compared to a lot of the other ghosts that we see. So overall, Ghostbusters 2 is an enjoyable film. It's not nearly as good as the original, and it definitely suffers from a lot of problems that sequels tend to do. But it's definitely one that's worth watching if you're a Ghostbusters fan. If you haven't actually seen it, watch the original, then watch this one. You're probably not going to have quite as good a time with it, but it's definitely worth watching. So with that said, what do you think of Ghostbusters 2? Do you see it as a noticeable step down from the original? Do you still enjoy it? What things do you like about it? What things do you not like about it? I'd honestly like to know. And with that, all that's left now is to go see the new movie when it comes out in theaters in a few days. So, as always, you can subscribe to my channel, check out some other reviews, and until next time, I'll see you at the movies.